It is early 2019 and time for the annual State of the Union address. Well, State of the Dash Union, anyhow. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Davis. Recently, I had the opportunity to sit down with the CEO of the Dash Core Group. We discussed how things went for Dash in 2018 and where he sees things heading in the year ahead. That interview with Dash Core Group CEO Ryan Taylor is coming up right now. Well, it is a pleasure to welcome Ryan Taylor, the CEO of Dash Core Group. And Ryan, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I guess I'd like to do a State of the Union address if we could, and we'll do it just like they do it in the United States. The actual State of the Union coming up next week, maybe. Depending on
maybe in written form. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Or at least with one side of the house watching anyhow. But they begin usually by talking about the previous year and the accomplishments and the things that happened in 2018. So why don't I ask you first off, other than, of course, the drop in price, how did 2018 look for you looking back now from a Dash perspective?
Yeah, well, 2018 was a year of continued building, and I think that the network had a great number of successes. And really solidified, I think, our view on what an effective strategy looks like as we, move closer and closer to kind of our landmark release evolution, which we'll talk more about. And so I think that kind of the highlights for us is Venezuela was an incredible growth market for us. Both on the merchant side and the consumer side. We finished the year with more than 2,500 merchants in the country of Venezuela, and really demonstrated the value of cryptocurrency to these people. It's much more than hyperinflation that we're solving for that environment. We also made great progress with the product itself. We rolled out 2 major releases and completed the coding on a release that just came out this week, version 0.13. All of that was accomplished in 2018. And we saw, the beginning of adoption in some of our other strategies, including in the cannabis space, where the first platforms leveraging our partnership with Alt36, that's a payment gateway for the cannabis industry, onboarding their first customers. Those are mostly in the business-to-business space, so they're not as visible as some of the consumer-facing things, but made great progress in that area. And, we saw continued growth in the number of transactions on our network. I think that stands in contrast to a lot of the other payment networks. On a typical day now, you can check the statistics. Most days, Dash has more transactions than Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Monero, some of these much larger coins, and I think it really speaks to the progress that we've made on actual adoption. And then from a research front, we completed some research with Arizona State University that validated our assumptions about the scalability of our network. We believe that we can easily move to 10 megabyte blocks very safely based on the research. And they never found a limit. 10 megabytes was the largest size that they attempted. And so this year they're testing even larger block sizes. What that tells us is we have the room to scale much, much larger than the Bitcoin network, probably 50 to 100 times what the Bitcoin network can handle without changing our current architecture. And we also researched alternative architectures that would allow us to scale to even greater numbers. So I think we're solving a lot of the problems with cryptocurrency. I think that we are demonstrating the value with practical use cases And I think that we're making progress on actually capturing some of those markets. And so I'm very optimistic that we can continue to make that kind of progress this year. From a price standpoint, it's not, obviously 2017 was getting ahead of ourselves on price. And, the market really exploded in 2017, especially in the altcoin space, which really eroded Bitcoin's market share. But 2018 was a big retracement there. I think if you look at the numbers, though, both Bitcoin and the altcoins, we keep seeing higher lows every year. And I don't think that trend is going to stop. The lows are predicated on adoption, and the highs are predicated on the level of speculative investment that's occurring within the space. And I'm really focused on raising that floor. I know that the entire Dash ecosystem is focused on raising that floor, and I think that we're doing a great job at it. The price does affect us, though, because Dash has a budget system, and that budget pays out in Dash. And so when the value of Dash drops, the activity that can support drops. And so I know a lot of the teams have had to tighten their belts. Some of the larger projects, it's just impossible to fund them all. And I think that that has led to kind of us as a community kind of reach our resources to where we're finding the most value. So, that's kind of long and short, kind of what 2018 looked like for us.
And just one more quick question looking back. Anything you may have done differently? Now, do you have a chance to look back in hindsight? Anything that you think you could have approached differently or done differently from a core group standpoint?
Well, Dash Core Group is a cost center for the network. We produce, the code or a lot of the different wallets that are available. We do a lot of the programming on the protocol level, and we do some of the business development and some of the marketing activities as well. When there were boom times and our own balance sheet was growing as a result, we stopped taking funding from the network. We had what we needed to operate, and our mentality was, we should be drawing from the network what we need. There were also a number of community members who expressed concern if we were to build up a war chest, if you will. How would the network be able to hold us accountable in the future if we were to do things that the network didn't agree with? And so we really did try to run a little too close to the sun in terms of, the amount of funding that we were drawing and the amount that we were holding. And I think in retrospect, that was a mistake. I think we should have had much more of a buffer. We could have socked away a couple $1 million that would have, protected us during a down market. I think it would have been premature to do it at the time because Dash Core Group hadn't yet issued its shares to the trust. And so, until that was in place, it was difficult to even propose something like that. And now we are in a position, I think, to be able to do it. I wish I would have acted faster on those things and made the case to the community that we needed to set some money aside. The way things are structured today, Dash Core Group is 100% owned by the Dash DAO Irrevocable Trust. The trust beneficiaries are the network itself. And so it is a safe place to put money for a rainy day. And the network also has the ability to elect the trust protectors. We're going to hold an annual election. The first one is taking place in March, and that provides governance over that entity such that nobody can run away with that honeypot. And so I think that the legal structure is now there. The next time we have, a good price run, I think it would behoove the network to really set aside the resources for a longer term support of the network, knowing that they have the ability to replace the leadership team. And so that's my one big regret, is not having that in place much sooner, and getting that money set aside and available in a time like this, where the prices come down for almost a record number of days.
I was going to ask if you've seen my notes, because my very next question as we headed into 2019 was to start off with talking about the Trust Protectors election, but you've already mentioned it, so I'm not going to worry about it.
No, we can go into details on it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go into details.
We've done something very unique in the way that we've set up both the network and our own entity that, we're basically a vendor to the network. And the network is making investments into Dash Core Group, and we feel that it would be a really bad structure if we were owned by someone or owned by a few partners. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a service provider coming to the Dash network and providing a service to the Dash network at a profit. There's nothing preventing that from being the case. But the group of people that originally started Dash as a group of volunteers, we're not here for that reason. We're here to build a great network and see it grow. And so in that spirit, we were looking for a solution to how we could structure ourselves in a way where no one person or group of people could profit from this. And so that was the purpose behind the trust. We set up the trust. It's a New Zealand trust. It's in a very, credible location for trusts. Great trust law, and 100% of the shares in Dash Core Group are issued to that trust, and that creates a fiduciary duty back to the network. I can't pay myself $1 million a year. I can't squander the funds. I have a fiduciary duty to that trust. They are our shareholder, and so I have to serve the network in the best way possible, that I see possible, and that's the standard that I'm held to. And so we think that that's a really healthy structure. A lot of these ICOs and foundations, they get control of a large amount of money, and it's really hard for the token holders to hold those people accountable. And so we wanted that direct accountability as well. And the trust essentially has some elected positions that oversee it. They're called trust protectors. And once a year, the charter for that trust requires that there's an election held to ratify a new set of trust protectors. That election takes place with the votes of the masternodes that essentially operate the Dash network. And so those entities or people that are invested in Dash get to make that determination. And so it really is it closes the loop. It allows the masternodes to assign the board to Dash Core Group, and Dash Core Group receives its funding upon approval from the network and is there to serve the network. If we ever deviate from that mission or do a poor job at it, the network has multiple courses of, multiple recourse options available to them to remedy it. So the aim being, we want this to be sustainable. We want good governance in place, and we've invested a lot of time and energy into making sure that that's the case.
So that overlap, that is a big thing starting off 2019 with the election of the trust protectors, and then you also started 2019 with a bang by releasing version 0.13. Talk about that a little bit. What did that give everybody?
Yeah, so we're code complete back in Q4 of 2018, but we don't really like to release code in the middle of or near the end of a budget cycle. And there was a budget cycle coming on December 31st. So we waited until the new year and then released version 0.13. It's a big step forward for the network. It's a huge amount of code. And so far it is going very smoothly. The transition, we've not received reports of any issues. Any major issues so far. It was extensively tested throughout fourth quarter, and we're very pleased with it. It brings a bunch of new features to the network. Some of those are for our masternode owners or masternode operators who have new options available to them. They can specify the address that the payment goes to for their masternode rewards. They can split out their voting keys, operator keys, etc., so that someone else can operate their masternode safely on their behalf, so that someone else can vote their masternode votes on the network on their behalf. So we think it'll increase the amount of participation and make it easier for people to operate those. Some of the other changes we brought are consumer facing. So we made some improvements to both our instant send feature and our private send feature. For instant send, we're basically upgrading simple transactions to instant send for free by default. Around 90% of all transactions on the network are considered simple transactions. They contain less than 4 inputs, and so they'll get automatically upgraded. That has, a number of security improvements to those transactions, and also just provides a better user experience. On private send, we've rolled out a smaller denomination for the smallest private send unit. That effectively means that private send is cheaper to use. It carries lower fees, and also should enable the mixing or the preparation of those transactions to take place much faster. So there's a number of user-facing improvements that we think our users will appreciate. Some of the biggest changes are under the hood and are foundational elements for our upcoming release, Evolution. We have one more release to do before Evolution comes. That's version 0.14. 0.14 will include a couple new technologies, but the one that will have the most impact on the network is our chain locks technology. What this does is it leverages the masternode network to lock in place the chain tip, and that means that double spends are effectively impossible. 51% attacks on our network would be impossible after that point, and really there's no reason for an exchange to wait for, say, 6 confirmations on your transaction in order to credit your account. It could happen right away. And so we think that this is also going to have a big improvement on the user experience. There's a lot of other things that the technology that we're leveraging for chain locks can be used for, and we'll be rolling out more features that leverage that in future versions. And then finally, we're headed towards Evolution with all of this, and I'm probably covering topics that you want to ask me about.
It's all good. I was just going to say, I don't have to ask any questions because you're answering each question as we go along here.
Yeah, I'm kind of leading you to the next one.
It's all good.
But really, all of this is aimed at making cryptocurrency easy to use. If you ever sit somebody down in front of a computer and say, hey, use Bitcoin, and they've never used it before, every step from setting up a wallet to understanding cryptographic addresses to figuring out how to acquire it to figuring out how to find somebody else's address. Oh, you mean I have to talk to them over the phone or email them or somehow get it outside of the network? It's just a user experience that they're not used to. It's very difficult for your average person to figure out. And there is a lot of conversion rate issues with Bitcoin. People don't always make it to the next step. There are significant hurdles in trying to figure out cryptocurrency. We want to make it as easy to use as Venmo. You download a wallet to your phone, you sign up for an account, you pick a username on the network, and then you start sending friend requests within the network itself. No need to exchange a cryptographic or even see a cryptographic address. You literally just see other usernames that you're friends with on the network, and you can send and receive payment requests. But evolution is much bigger than that. That's just one application. We're allowing anyone to build an application using the Dash network that defines their own data hierarchy, own data schemas, and can access that data from any device. So if I have a laptop and I've got a desktop and a phone and a tablet, all of them can see the same data, interact with the network in the same way, and basically be able to interact with these applications in ways that they're already familiar with. I think too often the response is, well, people need to learn how to use Bitcoin. We need to educate. And I think that's the wrong answer. I think the right answer is, no, you need to make your product easy to use and intuitive. The minute you respond to me that you need to educate a consumer on how to use something, that's not a good product, period.
And it's interesting too that you mentioned about, and I've heard this comparison a lot before, is the way cryptocurrency is now. You look back and compare it to the internet 25 years ago. It was really hard to use the internet 25 years ago, and then it became easier and easier to use until the basic consumer could actually use the internet. And it really is the same kind of thing with cryptocurrency in its infancy right now, isn't it?
Yes, I think we're beyond the point where, there was a point where cryptocurrency was command line, basically, and very, very difficult to use. You had to be highly technical in order to use it. Then came, the graphical user interface improvements. And I would say that where we are today is maybe the equivalent of the Mosaic browser. There's some hyperlinks, there's some text, and maybe there's some, 16-bit pictures on the web page, but it's still really difficult to use. We're a long, long way from the rich HTML format that we're used to today with video streaming and all these capabilities that nobody back then could have imagined the internet becoming. And I think what Dash is trying to do is trying to bring that Netscape moment to the ecosystem where we bring a truly usable product where your average consumer can sit down, they can type in a username and get started. And that the rest of it isn't so hard to figure out. I can now figure out how to send a payment. I can easily connect to a broker. We've done a lot of work this year to integrate uphold services directly into our native wallets. And that allows people to, acquire Dash much more easily and send it to their own wallets using uphold services. So, it's that type of mentality that we have, that it's all about the user experience. The major thing holding back the cryptocurrency space right now is the user experience. And in order to fix that, we had to go back to the technology and really revamp the architecture in order to make the type of experience that we wanted possible. And it's not just the end users, it's also the businesses and programmers that leverage these networks. It's really hard right now to use them. We're introducing, APIs using standard protocols that programmers will be able to access the features of the network through. And when you make it that much easier, you see that many more integrations, you see that many more use cases that just weren't addressable before. And so on that front, we're kind of mimicking what Stripe has done for the credit card space. They've made integrating payments into your website or application very, very easy, and they've exploded. And they're not even a very old company. They're less than a decade old, and they've grown like gangbusters. We think the same thing can happen with cryptocurrency if you actually make it usable for consumers and usable for programmers.
Going to call you and DCG to task a little bit here. I'm on the forums. I see some of the discussions, and I'm sure you do too. There is some concern out there in the Dash network about delays in things like evolution and a new website and that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on the difficulty in providing the content and the things that you need to provide in a timely manner sometimes?
Yeah. So let's start with the website. The website has been a vendor issue. They have missed their dates and deliveries. And we have taken matters into our own hands at this point. We've completely taken over the project in the last couple of weeks because the problems have become even worse. We're obviously going to be in a dispute with that vendor. And I have no intention of paying for services not rendered. So enough said there. I think that we don't have a lot of resources internally, but the work is nearly complete. And we finally gained access to it. For a long time, they were refusing to allow us access to it. And I think we got as far through the dispute as the point where we've gained access to that material. We're assessing what's there. It's in pretty good shape. We should be able to launch soon. Obviously, we won't be using that vendor going forward. We'll try a new vendor, and hopefully delivery times will be fixed going forward. It's unfortunate. They came with good recommendations. I think their intentions were good, but ultimately they took on too many projects from too many other places, and I think they're just struggling. And so I think that we will be doing a lot more due diligence on a new set of vendors, and we'll fix it. But the criticisms are valid. Maybe we should have acted sooner on that one. Maybe there's more pressure we could have put on them, but I think we ultimately are going to land in a good place. So, I'm not going to say that the criticisms aren't valid. They absolutely are. And we need to find partners that we can rely on. On the evolution delivery, dates were originally put out for evolution before a design even existed. I think that those dates were very ambitious, given the scope of the work. And those estimates predated Dash Core Group, and it involved folks that aren't even with the project currently. And so I think there's a lot of expectations that were set associated with that I don't think were ever realistic. We tried our best to put forward a roadmap that would match that as quickly as possible. in projects as ambitious as evolution, things never go as well as you hope. And I don't think putting out a revised set of dates that were equally aggressive to the original ones was a wise idea. What we're focused on now is accelerating our delivery. Bob Carroll, our CTO, came in last summer, joined the team, and I think that he has kind of ramped the acceleration something like this, where it's now starting to go at a pace that I'm beginning to get much more happy with. But when you start off the first 100 days or so assessing the situation, it didn't really change the trajectory until the tail end of the year. What I think you'll see going forward is an acceleration in that, and that's really what he's been promising to the community. Version 14, I think, is what we should be judged on in terms of how quickly we turn that one. I think it's going to be a lot faster than version 13.
So let me finish this by just asking Ryan your thoughts on the year ahead. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the cryptocurrency world and Dash's place in it, or what are you thinking about 2019?
Well, I am optimistic. As I pointed out earlier, in the case of Bitcoin and Dash and most of these leading cryptocurrencies, year after year, the yearly low is a bit higher. And I think that is because usage on many of these networks is beginning to increase. The number of users is increasing. And I think eventually those two things need to converge. So I think from a price perspective, I'm optimistic, but I'm probably a bit biased there. I wouldn't be here if I weren't optimistic about it. And from an adoption standpoint, which I view as far more important, I think that 2019 is likely to be a continued year of growth for us. We haven't seen a let up in the efforts that are taking place in Venezuela and Colombia and other places around the world. We at Dash Core Group continue to find opportunities for integrations, and ones that don't require a great deal of funding in order to make happen, that are great use cases for Dash. And so I think that even if the market does kind of remain in a depressed state like it is right now, we're going to find ways to continue growing the network. And lastly, we continue to roll out improvements with every single release that have benefits to our users. And in version 13, when it gets adopted by the network, we're about 19% of the way there right now, and it just came out this week. When those upgrades do take place, we're going to introduce a better user experience. People are going to be able to instant send transactions from literally any service provider or exchange by default. And so, a lot of our users will have a substantially better user experience just because of the upgrades that we're doing to the network already. And so, every single one of these releases, things get better from a user experience standpoint. Our wallets continue to improve as we make investments in those. I think that when you improve the user experience and make things better, your adoption rate can only accelerate. And so I'm really hopeful and optimistic that 2019 will just continue to see the transaction counts grow. We'll continue to see the number of users grow, and we'll continue to identify these use cases that cryptocurrency and Dash in particular is well suited for, and really exploit those markets to the fullest. And it's a long road. People are not going to switch to cryptocurrency easily. It is somewhat foreign. So, I wouldn't listen to people that say that, well, in 3 years' time, fiat currencies are going to be dead. I don't think that's true. Um, you know, but I do think that the number of people that follow and believe in cryptocurrencies will continue to grow.
Ryan, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking to you about Dash and the State of the Union, and wish you all the best in 2019.
All right. Thank you very much, you too.